And welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we're going to talk about what is a bond. We're going to talk about what is a bond. And bonds are, we're going to see in a later video, bonds are going to be extremely important in talking about the Federal Reserve and monetary policy and their job of controlling the money supply. But to understand all of that, we first have to understand what is a bond. What is a bond, and what is the purpose of a bond? So a bond, just to say very very quickly, a bond is essentially debt. A bond is a form of an IOU, IOU money. So let's talk about what this might really look like. So first of all, a bond is it's a piece of paper. So here we have some, often in the past they would have been on some fancy piece of paper, and it would have had all kinds of decorations, so it couldn't be counterfeited around the sides of it, and all kind of fancy printing and so forth. And then the bond might say something like this. It might say that I owe $100 to the owner of this bond 1 year from today. 1 year from today. So it would have some date certain when the bond's going to be paid. So I owe $100 to whomever holds this bond 1 year from today. And then here's the guy who's going to issue a bond. Some person is going to issue a bond. So this guy creates this bond, and he takes this bond and he's going to sell the bond to somebody. And then over here we're going to have some other person, and this other person is going to be the person who's going to buy the bond. So this guy is going to buy the bond. So what would happen here is this person has $100, this $100 bond. He says, I owe $100 to the owner of this bond 1 year from today. And then he would say, well, who wants this bond? And this guy says, well, I want the bond. But, there might be other people that want the bond as well. And so they would start bidding to purchase the bond. And somebody might say, I'll pay $10 for that piece of paper. And another guy says, I'll pay $20 for that piece of paper. And the price gets bid up. And let's say that this guy here wins the auction, and he pays the highest amount for the bond. Let's say he pays $95 for this bond, for this piece of paper. So this guy over here, he's going to take $95 of cash, and he's going to give it to this guy. He's going to give him $95 in cash. And then this guy, he's going to give the bond. He's going to give the piece of paper. This piece of paper is going to go to this guy. Okay? He's going to give him the piece of paper. So that means this guy now has $95, and he'd do whatever he wants with $95. He'd try to start a business. He could, whatever he wants to do. And then this guy, he's going to come back 1 year from now, and he's going to say, okay, you owe me $100. I have a piece of paper that says you owe me $100. And so he comes back, and he with this piece of paper, and he delivers the piece of paper back to the first guy, gives the bond back, and then this guy right here pays this other guy $100. Now, this guy at the very beginning, this first fellow over here, we would say that he is the let me just change up here. This first guy right here, he is the seller of the bond. This guy was the guy who was selling the bond. He was the seller. And what this essentially means when he's the seller of the bond is it means that he was borrowing money. When you sell a bond, you are borrowing money. How much money did this guy borrow? He borrowed $95, which was the price of the bond. And then this person over here, he was the buyer of the bond. He was the guy who was buying the bond. And what that means is that he was the lender. He was lending money. So the buyer lent $95 to the seller, and then a year from now, the seller has to pay the buyer $100 back. So this buyer, he made how much money? He made $5 of interest. He made $5 of interest on a $95 investment. Now, just as a side note, if he had paid, if this guy had paid $96 for the bond, then he would have only earned $4. So let me just record that up here. If he would have, when he paid $95, when that was the price of the bond, let me back that up here and just mark that so we're a little more clear. When the price of the bond was $95, the interest that he earned was $5. Now, if the bond price gets bid up to $96, and then he gets paid $100 next year, then he would only make $4 of interest. And if the bond price got bid up to, let's say, to $97, and he gets paid $100 next year, then he would only get $3 of interest. So we can draw this general conclusion. We can say the higher the bond price, the lower the interest that they earn, the less interest that they earned. Okay, the higher the bond price, the lower the interest. And then that would go the other way. The lower the bond price, the greater the interest that they would earn, the greater the interest. So there's an inverse relationship here between the price of the bond and the interest that the person earns. So either way, the seller of the bond is borrowing money. In this case, he's borrowing $95, which is the price of the bond, and the buyer is the lender. He lent $95, and next year he's going to get paid $100 back, which is the value that is stated on the bond. So that's what a bond is. It's the bond is just debt. Okay. Now it's not limited to this. This is not the end of it, because what this guy here could do is this guy, let's say 6 months later, 6 months into he buys the bond, and 6 months later he's not confident anymore about holding this bond. He's not confident that this seller is going to pay him back, or maybe he just needs some cash right now for whatever, something came up in his life and he needs cash or something. So he is allowed to sell the bond. He doesn't have to hold the bond. So he could now go sell the bond to some third person. So we're running out of room here, but we'll just stick a third guy up here. So there'd be some third guy up here. And so now what could happen is this guy could now sell the bond to the other person. Maybe he would sell the bond for, he would give him the bond, and the other guy might give him, let's say $98 or something like that. So then this guy still made $3. He bought the bond for $95. He sold it for $98. And now this guy over here owns the bond. So now when the bond finally matures, when it's time to cash the bond in, now this guy over here who paid $98 for the bond is going to go back here to the original seller and say, give me my money, give me my $100. Okay, so this bond can sell lots and lots and lots and lots of times, and many bonds do, because often this original person who is selling the bond, it's not just some person. It might be a bank. It might be some other corporation. But what we really care about when we talk about the Federal Reserve is that this would be the United States federal government. The United States federal government would sell bonds in order to borrow money to finance spending. And some of the bonds, instead of being due 1 year from now, some of the bonds don't mature for 30 years. So that bond could trade hands many, many times over 30 years until the United States federal government finally has to make good on it and has to pay it back. By the way, one last thing. What if this guy doesn't pay the $100 back? What if whoever the owner of the bond is after a year comes back and says, hey, I want my $100, and this guy says I don't have it? Well, then, it's breach of contract. So this other person, they could sue because this guy did not fulfill his contract. So he has an obligation. But if he does not fulfill it, then that is called a default. He defaulted on the bond. He didn't make his debt payments. The United States federal government, I don't think has ever defaulted, if my memory is clear. I don't think they ever defaulted on a bond in United States history, and so that's a really big deal because it means that we're creditworthy. It means that when the United States government borrows money, that they're going to repay it. They're going to repay it. All right, so that's how a bond works. That's what a bond is. When you sell a bond, you're really just borrowing money. When you buy a bond, you're really just lending money. And that's going to be that's going to be really important for us, but not for the reasons that we might think. This United States federal government borrowing money, that's really not what we're worried about when we talk about the Federal Reserve and the money supply. So we'll talk about that on a future podcast. We'll talk about the Federal Reserve and the money supply and how they use these government bonds, how they're going to use those government bonds. All right, this has been Mr. Hagan on another podcast. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you on the next podcast.